the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So we are continuing with our series on the 7 days of creation, which really have to do with the process through which the Lord is able to recreate each one of us through the teachings in His Word. And we're now up to day 4 of creation, which we talked about with the children this morning. And just to give a little recap, on day 1 of creation, the Lord said, "Let there be light." And light happened. And what this presents in our lives is that first time that the light comes on inside of us and something tells us, I want to be a good person. I want to live a good life. That first instinct to move in the right direction. That's day 1. And then we get to day 2, where there's the separation of the waters above from the waters beneath. And this is where we start to have experiences in our lives that show us that there's higher principles that we should be holding ourselves to. That the good life doesn't come from just following ourselves and doing whatever we think is going to make us feel good in the moment, but that there's something higher that we should be looking towards and we should be striving for. And then we get to day 3, which we talked about last week. And I said it was kind of a day of transition because the Lord gathers together the waters and He makes the dry land appear, at which point really the entire earth has been created. And the Lord moves to start filling that earth with things. And He fills it with all things of the plant kingdom. With these tender herbs, these grasses, and then these plants that create their own seeds. And then finally trees that bear fruit. And we talked about how that day really represents when we see these high principles and we finally decide to start putting in the work to hold ourselves accountable to those ideas and start living a better life. When we start actually making the changes in our lives to live better. But at that point, we're still doing it from ourselves. We're doing it because we think that we have found the solution and that we've come up with the best way to live. And a lot of times, there's still a lot of selfishness in that we're doing the right things, but we're doing it because of what we are going to get out of it. And now, looking at the flow of the way the Lord is creating things, you might assume that, okay, He created the earth, there's the waters, then He makes the dry land appear, He fills it with plants, and you might think the natural next step would be to fill it with animals, right? But that's not until day 5. That's what we're talking about next week. There's kind of this day that's sort of put right in the middle there, and it almost doesn't seem like it quite belongs, right? That we have the earth and then plant life, and then we zoom out and the Lord creates the sun and the moon and the stars before He can come back in and create all of these animals, human beings and things. And last week we read a passage from the teachings of the New Church that described the plant life, representing us doing good things from ourselves and sort of for ourselves. And that the animal kingdom, really, once we get to a point that we're doing the right things for the right reasons. And so this week, when we're looking at day 4 of the creation of the sun, the moon, and the stars, it really represents the step that gets us from point A to point B. This is the process that helps us move from doing things for ourselves to doing things out of a genuine love of what is good. So to begin talking about this, I want to turn to the teachings for the new church. And I want to share with you all a passage from the book Canna Celestia. And this talking about the representation of the 2 great lights that the Lord made on day 4. The representation of the sun and the moon. This is Arcana Celestia number 30. When people are being recreated by the Lord, faith develops in this way. First of all, they have no life, because life does not exist in anything evil or false, but only in what is good and true. Then they start to receive life from the Lord by means of faith. First, by faith existing in the memory, which is factual faith. Then by faith existing in the understanding, which is conceptual faith. And after this, by faith existing in the heart, which is loving or saving faith. Factual faith and conceptual faith are represented in the verses that come before this by the inanimate things that were created, by the waters and the dry land and the plants. But faith brought to life by means of love is represented in what follows by the animate, by the animals that the Lord is going to create, and the human beings. Consequently, this is the first point at which love and the faith deriving from it, which are called lights, are dealt with. Love is the greater light, which has dominion over the day, and faith deriving from love is the lesser light, which has dominion over the night. Let me just read that last part again one more time. Love is the greater light, which has dominion over the day, and faith deriving from love is the lesser light, which has dominion over the night. So this passage is talking about the way that faith develops inside of us. That it starts with this faith that's in the memory, where we just start to learn things that are true and we understand, okay, there's things that are right and wrong. And then we move on to this conceptual faith, which is in our understanding. And that's where we start to really understand the way that the Lord's teachings apply to our lives, the way that the Lord is guiding us to live a better life. And then from there, we move to what really is the goal for all of us, which is getting to a point that we have a faith that's in our heart. And that is where we have developed a love of what is true and what is good. And that love is able to guide us and able to help us live the life that the Lord shows us. And this is really what starts to develop on day 4 of creation. This is what we're talking about in this state, because that love, we're told, is what represents the Son that the Lord created. And this is a powerful step in this process, because up to this point, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about has really felt like things that we do. The representation of the creation of light and the separation of the waters and the plant life, it feels like we have to learn things. We have to have experiences that show us there's higher principles. We have to decide to hold ourselves accountable and live a better life. But this step is the first point where I think really start to take a step back and feel the Lord recreating us. We feel the Lord at work in our lives and in our hearts. Because when we get to that point that we are willing to make changes and put in the work and let go of some of our selfish motivations and do the right thing, over time, we will find ourselves struggling less and less to do them. That we will take a step and realize, I used to have to really pay attention to make sure that I did this the right way. Or I had to really pay attention to make sure that I stopped doing this bad habit that I used to have. But eventually we get to a point that we say, I don't even really have to think about it anymore. That something has changed inside of me, and I don't feel as great of a need to do these bad things, or I don't have as much temptation to go away from the Lord's path. And that is an incredible feeling. And that's the feeling of us receiving this love and this life from the Lord. And this is the goal that we are all trying to get to. But at the same time, we're only on day 4 of creation. This whole thing is a huge process, and our entire life we spend working through this process. The switch doesn't flip one day, and suddenly we receive love from the Lord, and we are great, and we do everything good from that point on. We have times where we feel the Lord's love guiding us, and it feels easy, and things are good, and we are doing good things. But just like we talked about with the children this morning, with the representation of the sun, every night, every evening, the sun goes down, and our corner of the earth is covered in darkness. And we have this same thing happen in our spiritual lives, that it feels like the sun goes down. This love that we've received from the Lord feels like it moves further away from us. and we feel our own selfishness, our own ego rising back to the surface, it feels like that's trying to get us to take the wheel again. But that's why the Lord on this day created not just the sun, but he also created the moon. It isn't as bright, it's not as warm, but it gives us light to keep us safe through the night. And we're told in the passage we read this morning that the moon represents our faith that comes from this love. And so what this means is that when we reach these nighttime states, when this love that we've received from the Lord feels like it's moving into the background and our selfishness is rising back to the surface, that we can hold fast to our faith, to the things that we know and that we believe, and we can continue to hold ourselves accountable to it and say, I'm not going to give in, even though my heart wants me to. And when we do that, that is like the light of the moon that gives us enough light that we can see and stay safe until the morning. And so this is really what this day is all about, is these alternations of states that we go through throughout our entire life, that sometimes when we're doing our work, we feel the Lord's love inside guiding us, and we can take a step back and realize that we're getting better at living a good life, that the Lord is with us, and that we are making progress. And there's times where we feel like we are totally on our own, and we have to fight tooth and nail to stand firm with what we believe. But if we do that, then we always make it through until the morning. And what's powerful about this, too, is like we talked about with the children this morning, the light from the moon doesn't come from itself. That even though in the middle of the night it feels like the sun is as far away from us as it can possibly be, the light that shines on us from the moon is still coming from the sun. And it's the same thing, that even though when we are going through our toughest trials and our deepest temptations, it might feel like the Lord's love has abandoned us. When we hold fast to our faith in the things that we believe, then that is the Lord's love still there with us. That the Lord's love is still guiding us and leading us forward. And that's what this is all about. And I want to leave with one last thought, and that's that in the new church, we're told that in heaven, the sun always shines the way that it does in the springtime. And so you think about springtime, and the sun, it's getting warmer, and it's giving life, and it's helping things grow. That's what the sun is always like in heaven. But the other thing that I always think about when I think about the sun in springtime, and I've talked about this in here before, is that in the springtime, every single day is a little bit longer than the day before it. And every single night is a little bit shorter. And so while we in this earth have to go through all 4 seasons every year, and we have to go through daytime and nighttime all the time, when we think about our spiritual lives, we can hold on to this idea and know that whenever we feel ourselves going through one of these nighttime states where it feels like the love of the Lord is far away from us and we have to hold on to our faith, when we do that and we hold on to the things that we know and we don't give in and keep on the path that the Lord has laid before us, then we will make it to the sunrise again. And that next day will be a little bit longer than the one before. And the next time that we experience nighttime state, it'll be a little bit shorter. And as we continue to do this over and over again, we will feel the love of the Lord guiding us more and more in our lives, and His peace and His love with us more and more. And we will feel the anguish of these selfish nighttime states less and less and less. And that's what this day is all about. That's what is represented in the creation of the sun and the moon and the stars, is going through these states and these change of states. Because when we do that, that is how we move forward, and that's how we grow close to the Lord every day. Amen. Please rise for a blessing.